We open today's broadcast, of course, with the news that President Biden has announced he is withdrawing from the U.S. presidential race. Following this announcement, Israeli leaders issued warm messages of thanks for his years of steadfast support for the state of Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu also spoke warmly about Biden as he was boarding the Wings of Zion on its maiden flight to Washington ahead of his meeting with President Biden tomorrow. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the report.
President Isaac Herzog posted, President Biden was the first U.S. president to visit Israel in wartime. He's a recipient of the Israeli Presidential Medal of Honor and is a true ally of the Jewish people and a symbol of the unbreakable bond between our two peoples. Opposition leader Yair Lapid posted a photo with the U.S. leader with the words, "Thank you." Former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett called Biden a true friend of Israel who stood by us in our most difficult moments. Defense Minister Gallant thanked Biden for his unwavering support of Israel over the years. Your steadfast backing, especially during the war, has been invaluable, he said. Before boarding the Wing of Zion on its maiden flight to Washington, Prime Minister Netanyahu said this will be an opportunity to thank President Biden for all that he has done for Israel.
I plan to see President Biden, whom I've known for over 40 years. This will be an opportunity to thank him for the things he did for Israel in the war and during his long and distinguished career in public service as senator, as vice president, and as president.
The prime minister said Israel does not pick sides in U.S. politics.
I'm leaving this morning on a very important trip to the United States at a time when Israel is fighting on 7 fronts and when there's great political uncertainty in Washington. I will address, for the 4th time, both houses of Congress as the Prime Minister of Israel. I will seek to anchor the bipartisan support that is so important for Israel. And I will tell my friends on both sides of the aisle that regardless who the American people choose as their next president, Israel remains America's indispensable and strong ally in the Middle East. In this time of war and uncertainty, it's important that Israel's enemies know that America and Israel stand together today, tomorrow, and always. Thank you.
Well, the Prime Minister has departed for what is shaping up to be a critical meeting with U.S. officials, including President Biden. Netanyahu's visit was originally intended to depart Sunday, but was delayed due to President Biden's schedule change. During his D.C. visit, Prime Minister Netanyahu is expected to meet with President Biden to discuss the ongoing Gaza war, as well as former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Prime Minister Netanyahu will also address the U.S. Congress in a joint session at the invitation of both Democrats and Republicans and make the case for the continuation of the Gaza war and urgent need to bring the more than 100 hostages home, which include 5 American citizens. Despite the bipartisan efforts, some Democratic lawmakers have already announced that they will not be attending the speech, including Senator Bernie Sanders and other members of the squad. On Monday, it was revealed that U.S. Senator J.D. Vance, now Trump's running mate for the presidential campaign, will also not be attending the speech due to campaign commitments. The campaign, however, emphasized that Vance is staunchly pro-Israel, and Vance's lack of attendance does not mean anything significant in terms of his approach to Israel. Netanyahu's visit has also prompted calls to protest, with anti-Israel groups already planning to surround the building and make a citizen's arrest of Netanyahu on the day of his speech. The Capitol Police have stated they are marking all necessary arrangements to ensure that no security incidents occur. Now, as Prime Minister Netanyahu prepares for a series of these critical meetings, he's also flying in at a time of immense turmoil in America. The Prime Minister's visit follows an attempted assassination of former President Trump, President Biden's resignation from the presidential race, and months of anti-Israel protests across the United States. How will all of this impact his visit? Well, here to answer these questions is senior contributing editor at JNS and co-host of the podcast Israel Undiplomatic, Ruthie Bloom. Ruthie, thank you so much for joining us today. Firstly, we saw last night Biden's announcement that he will not be seeking re-election and, in fact, is endorsing Kamala Harris, whom Netanyahu will also be meeting with during this trip. What can we expect to see from this meeting between now Vice President Harris and Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Probably something very boilerplate where Netanyahu will express his gratitude for American support and also stress that Israel is America's closest ally. And Harris will probably say something inane, as she usually does.
What impact, if any, will Biden's announcement have on the ability to implement some sort of hostage deal in the coming months?
Well, that's an excellent question. But, even when Biden was supposedly fully cognizant, which he wasn't, but even when he was ostensibly running things, the hostage deal was not being furthered, and that is largely the United States' fault. And that's because rather than really pressuring Hamas, there was way too much pressure on Israel because it was knocking on an open door. Israel said, okay, we're willing to do this, this, and this. And Hamas kept upping the ante because Hamas has no interest in returning hostages that are its leverage, and Hamas has no interest in ceding its rule over Gaza. And so the only way to get the hostages was a combination of military pressure and also great support, international support. And the United States has been extremely weak in this respect. I mean, even though there are American citizens being held hostage, Biden was completely impotent on that score.
And what has Kamala Harris's record been when it comes to the hostage situation? I mean, we've seen, obviously, she condemned October 7th, but she's been a little bit spotty when it comes to Israel. A lot of people are under the impression she will be more harsh when it comes to Israel than President Biden has been during this term. What's your take on this?
Well, I'm not sure she'll be more harsh, but she might be more vocal in her harshness. Biden had this way of saying, I just love Israel. I'm a big Zionist and all that. And that's not Kamala's shtick. The point is they were on the same page about one important thing or two important things. And one is this insistence on a ceasefire now, ending a war, no war with Hezbollah in the north, this constant appeasement of Iran on the one hand. And on the other hand, this insane push even now, post-October 7th, for a Palestinian state. So I don't think there's going to be a major change in policy. There might be a change in style and in rhetoric, because Kamala also, don't forget, has a bunch of the radical Democrats on her side, or at least in her corner to some extent.
I was just going to say, confirming what you said, some of the first people we did see endorse Kamala Harris for this presidential campaign were members of the squad. I think nearly all of the members of the squad, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib, as of now, have endorsed Kamala Harris. So that absolutely is correct and certainly concerning. Moving on just to the anti-Israel protesters. I mean, we've already seen they announced their intent to surround the Capitol building and citizens arrest Netanyahu. Given the other dramatic events which have taken place in the U.S., do you anticipate more or less controversy surrounding this speech of Netanyahu?
Well, it also depends what you mean, whether there's more or less controversy. Israelis are also, the Israeli protest movement, the anti-Netanyahu protest movement, is very happy about that controversy. On this end, there are those who tell him who say he shouldn't have gone in the first place, that he should have secured a hostage deal first. And there are others who say that he should step down anyway. And now, in America, I think the only real concern is for his security, especially in the wake of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. So, I think that, but that was to be expected because, you still have protesters in America saying that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza and all that nonsense. So, if in America, the anti-Netanyahu protests are really anti-Israel protests.
Now, what can we expect to see Netanyahu speak about in this address, as well as his meetings with President Biden? And do you think his tone will change due to some of the divisions, especially on the left in America, over Israel, over its conduct in this war?
Well, I think that he's going to take the opportunity to be not to be divisive and not to be, I would say, not to reprimand anybody in Congress. This is my assumption, is that he's going to, again, as he did in 2015, stress that Iran is actually the head of the octopus here, and that Israel is fighting a seven-front war, but it's all actually Iran, and that the entire Western world should band together to fight this evil regime. I imagine that's going to be what he stresses, and in so doing, stresses that we need an international coalition of forces against this, and also more pressure on Hamas for the release of the hostages. I doubt that he's going to take the tone that he did recently when the weapons shipments were upheld and were withheld, and he finally made a little video in which he said this is inexcusable, something like that, that America really needs to give us the weapons that were promised and that we purchased. I think he's not going to take that tone. He's going to probably try to rally, so to speak, rally the troops around the idea that we're all on the same side against the Islamic Republic.
All right, well, we are out of time, but I want to thank you, Ruthie, for taking the time to speak with us and share your analysis of the current situation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks for having me.
Well, with President Joe Biden announcing he won't seek re-election, the Democratic nomination for the 2024 president appears likely to go to Vice President Kamala Harris, who has already received Biden's endorsement, taken over the $96 million campaign fund, and renamed the campaign Harris for President. But there are still some Jewish contenders who may push to be her number two. ILTV's editor-in-chief Maayan Hoffman takes a look.
With U.S. President Joe Biden announcing he will not seek re-election, the focus shifts to potential contenders for the Democratic nomination to be decided at the party's national convention in August. However, unless something dramatically shifts, it appears that Vice President Kamala Harris has an inside track for the party's backing. Meanwhile, several Jewish narratives are emerging about this upcoming race. The most obvious is Vice President Kamala Harris's Jewish ties. She's married to Doug Emhoff, the first Jewish second gentleman. During Biden's term, Emhoff has taken on important duties relating to the Jewish community. 2 years ago, Biden asked him to lead a roundtable combating anti-Semitism. Last year, Emhoff played a crucial role in the White House unveiling its final strategy to address the issue. Harris herself has had significant involvement with the Jewish community, but has faced criticism for her stance on Israel. She was the first official to call for an immediate Gaza ceasefire, and has used strong language to describe Israel's role in Palestinian suffering. However, she has been firm on the need to return the hostages, and recently reaffirmed America's commitment to Israel's security in a call with President Isaac Herzog. In addition to Harris and her Jewish spouse, at least 3 Jewish candidates could be in the running for the White House, even if only as VP. Among them is Colorado Governor Jared Polis, who made history as the first openly LGBTQ and Jewish governor of his state. Following the October 7th Hamas attack, Polis condemned anti-Semitism and pledged to keep Colorado a welcoming state for the Jewish people. He has also urged state support for Israel and participated in the recent Jewish National Fund USA conference in Colorado, despite pro-Palestinian protests outside. Another potential candidate is Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a Jewish venture capitalist of Ukrainian descent, with an estimated net worth exceeding $3 billion. Despite his wealth, Pritzker often shares his family's modest beginnings, recounting how they fled pogroms in Ukraine in the 1880s with the help of the Jewish refugee organization HIAS. Pritzker has been a vocal critic of former President Donald Trump, labeling him a racist, homophobe, and even a felon. Finally, and perhaps the most popular candidate, is Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a day school graduate sworn in last year on a stack of Hebrew Bibles. Shapiro, who observes Shabbat, has gained favor among many conservative voters. He has also been vocal about the threats faced by Jewish students on campuses in his states, including a notable confrontation with former UPenn President Liz McGill before her resignation amid controversy. He has already endorsed Harris. Would a Jewish president or vice president be good for the Jews in Israel? The DNC begins on August 19th. At least until then, we can only speculate.
Since the Hamas attacks on October 7th, American Friends of Sheba Medical Center has stepped up in an extraordinary way. They've raised more than $35 million, ensuring the victims of the massacre and the soldiers who are fighting for Israel continue to receive life-saving treatments and rehabilitation. American Friends of Sheba has arranged for more than 150 volunteers to travel to Israel, providing critical support to the nation's largest and most comprehensive medical center. Be a part of the Sheba. Stand for health. Stand for Israel. Donate now.
Israel is on high alert, expecting retaliation following Saturday's devastating airstrikes on the Houthi rebel port of Hodeidah in Yemen. Intelligence reports say the Houthis would ramp up attacks as well as other Iran-backed groups in the region. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the report.
The Air Force released footage showing the devastating airstrikes against the Houthi rebel port Hodeidah. The Israeli strike group included F-15, F-16, and F-35 fighter jets, reconnaissance aircraft, and refueling planes. This due to the target being some 1,800 kilometers from Israel, making it one of the farthest ever actions. Officials said Saturday's strike on Hodeidah port used more force than the Air Force needed. This in order to send a message of deterrence, as well as financial damage to the Iran-backed terror group, impeding its ability to import weapons. The officials believe that the strike projected a message to Israel's enemies, especially Lebanon's Hezbollah, that Israel is capable and willing to target dual-use civilian military infrastructure. The Houthi terrorist leader vowed to continue attacking Israel.
عدوانه ذلك لن يفيده شيئا لن يوفر له الردع ولن يمنع العمليات التي ينفذها الجيش اليمني إسنادا للشعب الفلسطيني.
The Air Force and Air Defense are on high alert for reprisals in response to the airstrikes. Intelligence has assessed that the Houthis could ramp up attacks following the strike in Yemen, as will other Iran-backed groups in the region.
Day 290 of the war in Gaza, and we learn of an attempted terror attack at the entrance to Neva Asara near the Gaza border. A Canadian Muslim who flew into the country yesterday on a tourist visa journeyed to the Gaza border with a knife. He shouted in English about Israel harming Palestinians in Gaza and also tried to stab individuals standing at the entrance to the community. He was neutralized by local security forces before anyone was injured. In addition, 2 hostages have been announced as dead. Kibbutz Nirim announced today that 35-year-old Yagev Buchstav was kidnapped from Nirim on October 7th and died while in Hamas captivity. The second hostage announced today is 75-year-old Alex Danzig, who was kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. In Gaza, IDF troops continue ground and air operations in southern and central Gaza. There is also continuing heavy cross-border bombardment with an incoming rocket damaging one of Israel's most popular nature reserves. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the story.
Day 290 of the war in Gaza. Israeli forces battled Hamas terrorists in Rafah and struck areas in the center of Gaza where Hamas gunmen and assets were located. The army said soldiers killed a group of terrorists who were moving toward them and destroyed ammunition, tunnel shafts, and infrastructure in Tel al-Sultan in the eastern part of the city. Israeli fighter jets and drones struck more than 35 targets in the Gaza Strip over the past day. The targets included a primed rocket launcher in Khan Yunis, buildings used by the terror group, and other infrastructure. Efforts to achieve a ceasefire for hostage deal are ongoing. Before departing for the U.S., Prime Minister Netanyahu instructed Israeli mediators to return to the Qatari, Egyptian, and U.S.-mediated ceasefire talks on Thursday. Turning north, several explosive-laden drones launched from Lebanon struck the Hanita and Ya'ara area in northern Israel. Firefighters are battling a blaze sparked by one of the drones near Hanita. There were no injuries in the attack. Rockets hit an empty preschool in Kibbutz Dafna in the Upper Galilee. The kibbutz has been largely evacuated of civilians since the cross-border attacks from Lebanon-based terror group began on October 8th. Here, too, there were no injuries. Some 50 dunam were burned in a fire at the popular Banyas Nature Reserve caused either by rockets or shrapnel from interceptor missiles. The nature reserve has been closed to the public since the start of the war. In response, the IDF said it's carrying out a wave of strikes in South Lebanon. The Air Force carried out a drone strike on a Hezbollah cell spotted in South Lebanon's Hula. 2 Hezbollah weapons depots were struck by Israeli fighter jets, causing a series of secondary explosions that hit nearby villages with shrapnel.
After much controversy, draft notices have gone out to at least 1,000 Haredi men, requiring them to join the IDF. Let's take a closer look at what happened this week.
Yesterday, the IDF sent out draft notices for 1,000 ultra-Orthodox men following the Supreme Court's ruling on the draft. The move comes after years of tension over the issue and intense protests. In response to the draft notices, some have called to ignore the demands and focus only on studying Torah.
התורה בעיניי ערך עליון, ערך גבוה, וחשוב מאוד לחזק אותו ולא להחליש אותו. ומשלוח צווים באופן כזה, חד צדדי, פוגע בערך החשוב הזה.
However, many others are happy to serve their country.
אני חרדי. זה שהחולצה שלי שונה זה לא אומר כלום. אני עם ציצית, כיפה, הכל.
למה החלטת להתגייס?
חייב לתרום למדינה, במיוחד עכשיו בתקופה הזאת של המלחמה.
An additional 3,000 draft notices will be sent out in the coming weeks. A huge motivation for the draft was the heavy burden being placed on reservists and current soldiers due to the war in Gaza. Pressure has continued to grow on the ultra-Orthodox community to contribute their fair share to protecting the state. This includes a mandatory military service for 24 to 32 months.
Overnight Sunday, a 3.7 magnitude earthquake occurred near the Dead Sea. According to the Israel Geological Institute, the tremor was felt in the Jerusalem area and parts of southern Israel. One Jerusalemite said that her bed and couch moved and a book fell off the shelf, according to the Hebrew website Ynet. There were no reports of injuries or damage. The most recent similar earthquake in Israel occurred about 4 months ago in northern Israel. A 3.8 magnitude earthquake shook the area surrounding the Sea of Galilee. Experts, including State Comptroller Netanyahu Engelman, have strongly warned against the potential for Israel to experience a deadly earthquake in the coming decades. Both Turkey and Morocco experienced devastating earthquakes last year.
In a world where truth matters, stay informed with ILTV News, your source for accurate, timely, and insightful coverage from Israel. Join our community of global supporters who believe in the power of truth and the importance of Israel's story. At ILTV, we bring you the news that shapes our nation and connects us all. If you believe in Israel, if you believe in truth, this is your call to action. Become a part of the ILTV news community today. Visit ILTV.tv and subscribe now. Your support means more than ever.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 24 degrees Celsius or 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies are expected alongside warm temperatures set to reach highs of 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.